My intention today, guys, was to give you these archetypes, not to pigeonhole you into being one or the other or all this or all that or a combination of. It's just so you can start seeing how you view yourself and how other people view you. Now, I would challenge you to ask yourself, where do you fall? And where do you want to fall? We're just looking at what our strengths and weaknesses are, what categories we fall into, how we can improve in one area, and how we can shore up the areas we're not so great at so that we can be the well-rounded men that people need us to be. Men, today I want to talk with you about 7 masculine archetypes. A lot of the information I'm going to share with you is derived a little bit from the book Warrior King, Magician Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. But we've adapted it and added some different archetypes in here because I don't think that we all fit into one of those 4 categories. And quite honestly, I don't think we all fit perfectly into one of the 7 categories that I'm going to give to you today. Inevitably, when I talk about what it means to be a man in masculinity, I'm often met with questions about the warrior archetype, that if a man can't be a quote-unquote warrior, does that make him any less of a man? I think these archetypes, as I share them with you today, will help articulate that question for you, or at least the answer to that question, and help you understand, in the absence of some of the skills that we would generally attribute to manliness and masculinity, there still are ways to incorporate your personality, your style, and your archetype into a tool, a useful tool to influence those people around you in a positive and effective way. So I'm going to share with you, again, 7 of the masculine archetypes that I've identified. I'm also going to give you some examples, some very well-known examples of the types of men and who exactly would fit into each one of these archetypes. And then we'll talk about the pros and the cons and what each of these archetypes look like. So let's get into it. Before I get into the archetypes, though, I do want to explain that as a man, and this happens to be our motto, you can see it over my right shoulder. I think it's even on my hat. Our motto is to protect, provide, preside. And I think at the core of what it means to be a man is to be just that, a protector, a provider, and a presider. So if we break that down, to protect physically, mentally, emotionally, to protect our loved ones and to take care of them, to provide for them financially, spiritually, emotionally, and then to preside, which is synonymous with leadership, leading them effectively, leading them righteously, and helping those individuals under our care get to a place they could not have imagined going on their own. That is what it means to be a man. And a boy becomes a man when he learns how to do that effectively, when he learns how to harness his masculine characteristics and traits for productive outcomes to protect, provide, and preside for other people. Now, let's, as we know that is the foundation of, at least I believe that's what it is, and I think many of you listening would agree with that. If that's the foundation of what it means to be a man, to be a protector, a provider, and presider, the question then is, how do you do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. And typically, when we think of what it means to be a man, or we envision the quintessential man, we think of 2 archetypes primarily, and that is the king and the warrior. And those are 2 that are predominantly masculine. We're going to talk about that, but there's 5 others. So let's break this down. Number 1 is the king. The king is a visionary. The king is somebody who knows exactly where he's going to go. He has a sense of obligation, responsibility, and duty to lead people. He knows where he wants to go. He has a clear vision for what that looks like, and he's able to articulate that in a very clear way. These are the type of men that we want to follow because they have that visionary aspect, and it seems from where we sit that they have the mental, physical, and emotional fortitude to do the difficult things that most people are unwilling to do. When we're on social media or when we're having discussions with friends, a lot of men will cower. A lot of men won't share how they really feel. A lot of men will be more concerned with making sure everybody is happy and comfortable and complacent. But a king knows exactly where he's going, and he isn't afraid of offending people. He isn't afraid of ostracizing people that are not part of his quote unquote kingdom. He knows who his people are. He knows how to serve them. He knows how to communicate effectively with them. And he uses all of the tools at his disposal to lead from the front. This is what a king is. So if we're to look in culture today, relevant kings, and I want to throw this disclaimer out here, some of the people that I suggest and share with you today, you're not going to agree with or even appreciate the type of people they are. But I don't think there's any doubt, if we look at this objectively, that these are the king archetypes. Just because they're a king doesn't mean we need to agree with everything that individual has to say. But again, they know who their people are, and they know how to serve them and take them to a place that those people probably wouldn't go on their own. So let's take a look at this. Number one, Elon Musk. He is a king archetype. He's a visionary. He's willing to take risks. He's willing to explore new ideas. Now, he's not the greatest communicator, and I think that has to do with the way his personality works and the way his mind works, that a lot of it goes on up here, and his ability to communicate that effectively isn't always as polished as some of the other people that I share with you today, but he does know how to speak to his people. He does know how to communicate to his people. He does know how to get people on board with what he's doing. Now, make no mistake, this is a polarizing figure, especially since he bought Twitter, which is now X. He became more polarizing when he did that. A king isn't worried about appeasing everybody, because a king's job is not to make everybody comfortable. A king's job is to serve his kingdom. And Elon Musk knows who his kingdom is. And so he serves those individuals in spite of what everybody else might think of him. Another person that comes to mind immediately is Donald Trump. He is a king archetype. He's bold. He's audacious. Yes, he's brash. And yes, we can debate his morals and principles and all of that. And certainly there's room for discussion there. But there's no denying that he is a king archetype. He's got a vision. He's got the means to do it. He's got the mental, the physical, and emotional fortitude to see things through to the end. He isn't easily convinced that his way isn't the best way, or that there's another way of doing it. And we can debate the merits. But I'm telling you what, this is a man who's willing to take risks. He knows who his people are. MAGA community, MAGA country, right? He knows who they are, and he knows how to speak directly to who they are. And guys, if you're going to adopt this king mindset or this king archetype, then you need to be willing to identify who your loyal people are and speak to them directly. If we look at it in the context of order of man, I work with men. So everything that I share and talk with you about is fashioned knowing that I'm going to be communicating with men. Now, there's plenty of women who listen, and I'm grateful, and I'm glad that we have women who believe in what we're doing to reclaim and restore masculinity, but I'm not talking or speaking in a way that resonates directly with them. If they happen to find value, wonderful, but I speak to men. And so some people will say, well, you're ostracizing members of the group. I'm not ostracizing anybody. I'm inclusive of the people that I'm working to serve and lead, and that's what kings do. Another couple of examples that come to mind, and I'm just using well-known examples. I'd like you guys to take the characteristics and the attributes and the virtues of these individuals and really filter them through how you're showing up and how the people in your lives are showing up. Bosses, family members, colleagues, coworkers, friends, etc. Another couple of people that come to mind, Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs. Obviously a visionary, obviously willing to take risks, obviously willing to lead, rub people the wrong way. Not that that was his intention necessarily, but certainly willing to do it in order to serve a greater mission. And he knew how to inspire people to buy into the vision that he had. Another one that comes to mind is Jeff Bezos. Same scenario. Visionary, risk taker, willing to put it on the line, willing to express and share his beliefs and his ideas, and then obviously creates this incredible empire. And that's the underlying foundation of what it means to be a king. You are creating something bigger than yourself. Elon Musk has Cybertruck and Tesla. Well, I guess those are one and the same, but Tesla, SpaceX, obviously X now. He is building an empire. We can see that. Trump is building an empire. We can see that with MAGA. Steve Jobs built an empire. My phone's not right here, but I'm on an Apple computer. I've got my Apple phone over there. Millions and millions of men who listen to this podcast have the same devices. He's obviously passed away now, but he built an empire. Jeff Bezos with Amazon, starting by trading used books online, has built an empire. This is what kings do. And again, we don't have to agree with or like them, but but these are examples of what it means to be a king. Let's move into the next one. The next one is warrior. And typically this is the quintessential man. When I say think of a man's man, most people would probably think of either the king or somebody that falls into the warrior category. There's incredible warriors, not that they're all warriors in that they've joined the military, but they have this warrior mentality, this warrior spirit. They go out into the world and they protect, they defend. They have a deep sense of obligation to protect their people, to take care of, to provide for their people. And they're willing to risk themselves, their own lives in many ways, to embrace ideals, to protect people who are less than capable of protecting themselves. These are incredible, incredible men. A couple of that come to mind for me. Number one, Jocko Willink. This is a man who obviously, because of the nature of his work and career as a Navy SEAL and a Navy SEAL commander, this is somebody we can all agree, again, whether you like the guy or not is irrelevant, but this is somebody we can all agree is a warrior. He has a deep sense of duty and obligation. He has a deep sense of belief of right and wrong, good and evil, and he's willing to stand for what he believes in, so much so that he's willing to lay his life down in order to defend and protect that ideal. Another one that comes to mind, and by the way, some of these guys have been on the podcast. Jocko's been on multiple times. The other one I was going to mention is somebody like Cam Hanes. Now, Cam is not a veteran, but Cam is an avid hunter. If you guys follow Cam Hanes, you know that he's a hunter. This is the warrior mentality. He goes out into the world. He believes in what he's doing. He provides for his friends and family. He makes himself physically, mentally, and emotionally capable of doing his work, and he goes and he gets the work done. He goes out in the mountains and he's hiking. He's running a marathon just about every single day. This is a warrior mentality. Another person that comes to mind is somebody like Bedros Keuilian. Again, not a veteran, an immigrant to this country, and has created incredible organizations with Fit Body Boot Camp and Modern Day Night Project and the Squire program and the other programs that he's created. But when you listen to somebody like Bedros, you can clearly see that this is a warrior's heart. He's somebody that has, again, a deep sense of moral conviction. Somebody has a deeply seated belief in what is right and what is wrong. And he refuses, I don't even think it's in his DNA, to sit back and let things happen if it's something that is in conflict with his ideal of the way that he sees life. So those are three great examples of warriors. I'm just pulling a couple out that come to mind immediately for me. Obviously, there's a lot more. But if you want to be a warrior, you have to ask yourself, do I have that moral conviction? Do I have that clarity of right and wrong? Am I willing to say and do what needs to be said and done in order to protect that ideal? Am I willing to lay down my life? Do I believe enough in this thing that I'm willing to lay down my life? And am I a fighter? Do I have that fighting soul? Excuse me. All right, let's move to the next. And by the way, these are, again, we're talking about these 7 archetypes. Guys, all of these can be masculine. Again, we're tying it back to the masculine ideal of being a protector, a provider, and a presider. And all of these things can be done in each one of these archetypes. Now, I'm not going to say that these are always so black and white, or that we fit perfectly into these labels that we create. In fact, it's not even my goal to label these men or even you. It's my goal to help you see what masculinity looks like in various forms so that you can take your strengths and make those better, and you can take your weaknesses and shore those up. So let's move to the next one. In Warrior King, Magician, Lover, I think they would talk a little bit about the magician. Now, I've opted to go with the term jester. All right, the jester is an integral part of the community. He keeps things light. He keeps things fun. He keeps things enjoyable. We give the jester permission to say the things in jest. That's where that phrase comes from. In jest, that we ordinary civilians don't give ourselves the same permission to say. We have to have that outlet. So this is the comedian. This is the class clown. This is somebody who likes to make people laugh and sees life as just a process of enjoyable experiences. and wants to have fun and wants to play and wants to go on adventure. And these are crucial aspects of what it means to be a man. And also, I want to say that each one of these archetypes taken to the extreme can be a real challenge. The king, for example, becomes a tyrant. Okay, the warrior taken to the extreme becomes incapable of empathy and compassion and kindness and understanding. The jester taken to the extreme can't take anything seriously. He's sarcastic and irritable and moody, and a lot of the times could even be unsuccessful because he's so worried about making light of every situation that he's not really applying himself the way that he otherwise could. So it's important to know that this is a spectrum. You have the jester, but then you have somebody who's just the class clown and the idiot. You have the king and then the tyrant. You have the warrior taken to the extreme is also could be looked at as a tyrant or a warrior for the other side against you, right? So the jester, who comes to mind in the jester category? Well, somebody like Theo Von, right? Class clown, funny. He's even self-deprecating. He's willing to poke fun at himself. My girlfriend and I, about 4 weeks ago, were able to see Theo Von live here in Southern Utah. And he was always willing to poke fun at himself, but he didn't just poke fun at himself. He poked fun at everybody else. And it breaks the tension. It's the outlet. It's the vent that society needs in order just not to take everything in life so seriously and have some fun, lighten up, and laugh. And we all like to laugh. We all like to have fun. We all like to enjoy life. The jester is the person who makes it possible. Another one that comes to mind that maybe you wouldn't initially think of is somebody like Ryan Reynolds. Obviously, he's an actor. He's very well known, but he knows how to use comedy. He knows comedic timing. Again, another guy who's self-deprecating, another guy who pokes fun at things that aren't always so convenient to laugh at. He's willing to do that. You know, if you've seen the movie Deadpool, and I think there's a new movie, Deadpool versus Wolverine or Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't know what it is, but I can rest assured knowing that Ryan Reynolds is going to be the sarcastic, funny Deadpool that all of us already know. Okay, so another person that comes to mind is somebody like Dave Chappelle. Again, very funny, uses comedy to, and what I really appreciate about somebody like Dave Chappelle is Dave actually tackles real challenging societal issues that are always a little bit confronting, always a little bit polarizing and challenging. Dave does this in a very, very good way. And again, we can debate and talk about whether or not we agree with his opinions, but you cannot debate that he falls into the jester archetype. And he does it in a way that actually gets the real issues to the surface so that people can start talking about those things, hopefully in an intelligent way. So all three of those examples, Theo Von, Ryan Reynolds, Dave Chappelle, clearly personalities are different. Clearly they're looking at life differently. They see it differently, the way they approach their humor and their wit. These are also people who are very, very intelligent. I think that a lot of the times we discount comedians, their intelligence, because we think they're just being stupid or funny. They're not. They see things that we don't always see. They see life in a different way. You know, the way Theo Von thinks about things sometimes sounds ridiculous, but it's also really interesting if you think about it. And having those outlets and having those people that see things differently than the rest of us is a good thing. The other thing I'll say is that, again, we're always not going to fit into one of these categories or the other. There's going to be a lot of crossover. Warrior, for example, Jocko Willink. What's interesting about Jocko is he's also very well educated and he's able to communicate and articulate ideas. He's a genius marketer. And so that might fall into one of the categories I'm going to talk about here shortly, but we don't always fit neatly into one of these categories. We usually have strengths. So let's move into this next category. And this is the one I wanted to talk about with regards to Jocko. Now, he isn't somebody you would immediately think of somebody in this category, but he certainly can fall into this, or he has tendencies of falling into this category. And that is the scholar. That is the person who is well-versed, they're knowledgeable, they think about things deeply, they're analytical, they research, they dive deep into subjects that are important to them. They're not interested in surface level discussions. These people are not usually funny. They're not jesters. They're usually very serious. They take things seriously. They believe that life is to be is to be lived in a serious way. And so the two that immediately come to mind, the quintessential intellect, obviously you have a man like Jordan Peterson. Not a funny person, not somebody who's light and carefree, but he's clearly thinking about subjects in a deep, significant, and meaningful way. Sometimes, in fact, when he communicates, you can watch him. It's almost as if you're hearing his brain work, because he'll ramble on with sentences, and sometimes it's hard to really put those things together, and he'll go on different tangents, and then eventually he'll bring it back in because he's very intelligent. He'll bring it back together, and then all of a sudden you have a coherent thought. But that's his brain processing information, thoughts, ideas, and then bringing it in a way that's deliverable for people. Another person that comes to mind, again, this is an obvious example, is a man we know as Andrew Huberman. Very intellectual, very brilliant, very bright, maybe not always the greatest communicator, but we can't deny that this is a person who thinks deeply, more deeply than most people, about subjects that are relevant, important to him. Now, again, I haven't, these two individuals, Jordan Peterson and Andrew Huberman, at times I've said, you've heard me say, that I don't resonate with these guys. Like, a lot of this feels unnecessary because that's not my personality. And that's what we need to understand. Of course, the intellect isn't going to really resonate with somebody with a different archetype. Now, I'm going to bring Jocko back into this. Jocko is primarily a warrior archetype, but as I said earlier, we don't fit so neatly into these categories. He's also an intellectual archetype. He has a little bit of that in him. And we know that because when he does his podcast for 3 hours, he's obviously well-versed. He's well-researched. He reads the books. He's taking notes. He's asking thoughtful questions. And it's the dichotomy of the warrior and the intellect that makes somebody like Jocko interesting. It's the same reason why the intellectual jock is going to be an interesting person. When we think of jock, we think of big, dumb idiot. When we think of intellect, we think of nerdy, wimpy geek. Now, Jordan Peterson, no offense here at all, but he fits that physical description. Like, he's not a physical specimen. Now, he dresses well, he looks the part, but even with what he dresses, he's still signifying that he's the intellect. Think of his suit, think of his hair, think of his beard, which signifies wisdom. Think about the gray that he embraces. Think about his mannerisms. It's authoritative, meaning I'm the authority on this subject. Now, Andrew Huberman's a little bit of an anomaly because this is a guy who actually looks more like the warrior archetype. He's fit, he's strong, he's obviously a physical specimen. He trains hard, he works hard, and yet he's an intellect. And I think what's really important to extract is that when you as a man can embrace, I won't say conflicting archetypes, but competing archetypes, you actually make yourself really interesting. This is why Andrew Huberman's interesting. This is why Jocko Willink is interesting, because they have the warrior look, and Jocko's the warrior archetype with a secondary as intellect, and Andrew Huberman's an intellect with a secondary as a warrior. So these are interesting people because they not only do they apply or appeal, I should say, to their own archetype, they start appealing to other archetypes. And this is why you see men like this build influence and credibility and authority with large swaths of people because they're reaching across their primary archetype. All right, let's move over to the next one. The next one is priest. Now, the priest is interesting because the priest is able to tap into a higher power. The priest is not the authority, and the priest knows that he's not the authority. Where a guy like Andrew Huberman and Jordan Peterson might operate as if, and I'm not sure whether these guys believe in God or not. They don't really talk about that. Jordan talks about God and spirituality, but we don't know if he's actually a believer, as far as I understand. They're not appealing to a higher authority. They're appealing to scholarly, accurate data and information. That is their appeal. It's scientific, it's measurable, it's factual, it's tangible, we can see it. But a spiritual archetype doesn't rely so much on the data and the facts, but he's going to be more in tune with how he feels. And this is going to be an appeal to somebody other than himself. This is typically, it always is a higher power, whether it's God or Allah or any number of gods that people worship. So a couple of people that come to mind in this priest category, number one is somebody like Granger Smith. Granger's been on the podcast. He's a good friend of mine. In fact, him and I talk quite regularly as I was going through my divorce and my own personal struggles in my life. And I'll tell you, every time I talked with Granger, it was always an appeal to God. Here's what God wants of you. Here's how God is on your side. Here's a scripture that shows how we are meant to live. And so priests are representatives of their higher power, and they know that they are just a mouthpiece for something bigger and greater than themselves. And we need that. Whether you're spiritual or religious or none of that, we all have to have something that we believe is bigger than ourselves. What a miserable, miserable existence if we operated as if we were the supreme authority of our own lives. And you're not. Now, we have sovereignty, and as a Christian, I believe that God has given us that gift of sovereignty and agency, but ultimately, I am answerable to God. And the priest understands that, he recognizes that, and he appeals to the spiritual side, which is more feelings-based than it is intellectual or factual-based. Another person that comes to mind who's also been a podcast guest is Mark Driscoll. Now, Mark is a very polarizing figure. And again, we can debate the merits of who these individuals are and what they believe, but there's no denying that this is a priest archetype. Now, Mark's a little interesting because he is also a little bit in that warrior or king archetype. You can see it, and people will even make comments about it, that he's arrogant or he's egotistical. Now, I don't believe that's the case, but I think what they're reading is a little bit of that king and warrior archetype combined with the spiritual archetype. And so it comes across as not as humble or not as subject to the traditional view that we look at with a higher power, the priest. We don't see that with Granger. Now, Granger will fall a little bit more, and I don't really have a place for this, but Granger, I think, falls into a category that I'm going to explain at the very end, so I won't spoil it now. But Granger definitely has the priest archetype, and then he has the seventh archetype, and I'm going to share what that is here shortly. Please forgive me about the random coughing, too. I'm overcoming a little bit of a head cold, so that's what I'm dealing with. All right, so now we're on to number 6. So the sixth archetype is the statesman. All right, the statesman is the politician. He's smooth, he's charming, he's witty, he's clever. Taken to the extreme, obviously, politicians are among the least trusted individuals in society, but these are the people that are advocating for a certain belief in society, and they know in order to do that, they're going to need to appeal in a way that is democratic. I've got to work with these people. I've got to work with these people. I've got to be bipartisan. I've got to bring people to the center. I've got to convince these people to come over here, and I've got to compromise in order to make this deal to do this. Taken to the extreme, and we see this all the time in American politics and probably international politics as well. These are slime balls. They're scummy. We don't trust them as far as we can throw them, and that's taken to the extreme. But we can all appreciate the statesman. We can all appreciate somebody who's politically correct, who has that sense of charm and appeal, who knows how to say things in a witty and clever way to bring people to their side or to their cause, or at least get them to think about something different. Somebody who I think of immediately is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was an actor, of course, and that's going to fall into the last category I'll share here in a minute. But he was also a statesman. If you go back and see some of his most viral moments, and I don't think going viral was a thing when he was the president, but if you go back to some of his most viral moments now, it's his charm and his wit in dealing with and confronting polarizing subjects that made him really popular. You know, we all know Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. We've all seen the video where a balloon pops at a rally after he had been shot, and he said, "Missed me." We've all seen the video where he was debating with his opponent, and I can't remember exactly who it is. They were bringing up Ronald Reagan's age, and he said, I promise I will not use your age, your inexperience and youth as a weapon against you. He's very charming, and you can't help but like the person. You may not agree with the politics, but he's a very likable person, and it's hard not to want to listen. Those are people who feel like they can make a difference. They feel like they can change the world. We're not debating the political positions right now. We're just talking about the characteristics. So a couple of people that come to mind, and I'm going to give you one from both sides of the aisle. Number one, Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is a statesman. Now, interestingly enough, he was in the Navy, so he's also a warrior archetype, which I think helps him be a better statesman. But he's polished, he's smooth. Early in the presidential election for this year, I would have put my money on DeSantis. I think that he has all of the Trumpian type fighting capabilities with that warrior mentality, but I think he's polished like a statesman. He understands that he has to win both sides of the equation. He's willing to navigate those murky waters and to try to find the best way to navigate difficult and polarizing subjects, and he does it in a really classy way, frankly. And you can argue about the politics, but he is a statesman. Another one on the opposite side of the aisle, and just because you all know I'm conservative, a lot of you guys are not going to like this, but this is the reality. Somebody like Barack Obama. He is a statesman. Again, we don't have to agree with politics, but he's charming. He has the capacity to bring people together. He can speak well. He can present well. He shares topics in a way that make you consider and think about it differently than maybe you did in the past. He has a way with words. He can be witty at times. And he looks the part of a statesman. He looks presidential. So again, you can debate the politics, and that's why I wanted to give you an example from both sides of the aisle. But the reality is DeSantis, Barack Obama, and Ronald Reagan are all quintessential statesman archetypes. All right, guys. Excuse me again. The last archetype is the romantic. Ronald Reagan was a bit of a romantic. I mean, as an actor, there's obviously the bit of a romanticism in that, and I'm going to explain some more characteristics there. But the romantic is not somebody who just is the lover boy. That's not what I'm saying. The romantic is somebody who can turn on the charm, somebody who is almost magnetic. Like you can't help but like the person. They're very charming. They're enjoyable to listen to. You find yourself wanting to spend time with them. Generally, they're idealistic. They're not always so practical, but they're very idealistic. A lot of these people fall into the category of arts. So you might have, for example, an actor or a musician or a painter, somebody in the arts. And that's why I'm trying to give you a broad representation of what it means to be a man. But the romantic is definitely an archetype, and it's definitely somebody we're all familiar with. So who are a couple of examples of the romantic? One of these people have been on the podcast, one has not. But the first one that comes to mind is somebody like Matthew McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey is a very likable, charming person. There's no doubt about it. He can turn on the charm. He's got a good smile. He plays to the crowd. He's got ideals and vision. He's a little bit kind of out there, a little woo-woo, if you will, but he's very charming and very magnetic. He's definitely not a warrior. We know that, right? Just by looking at him, by the way he acts and his demeanor. And that's not a knock. That's just not his archetype. He's not a king. He can be a little Jester-ish, right? He's got some comedic timing. He knows how to make people smile and laugh. So he's got a little bit of that, but he is definitely a romantic. And the other one that comes to mind is somebody like Ryan Gosling. Obviously, we've got another actor, a romantic, somebody who can turn on the charm, somebody who can lay it on thick. And I'm not just talking about romantic charm. Even guys can't help but like the guy to some degree, right? Either you want to be like him, excuse me, or the ladies want to be with him. Very charming, just somebody who would be enjoyable to be around. Another person that comes to mind that may not fit into the same type of category, but is definitely a romantic, is somebody like The Rock. He is in the romantic archetype, right? He's, again, charming. He can flash that $1 million smile, or probably $1 billion smile at this point. You can't help but like the guy. He doesn't really get into politics. He's not pitting people against each other. He's got big ideals. He's got big dreams. He's willing to do interesting things. He's a bit of an entertainer, so he can be a little loose with that at times and really lay it on thick. This is a romantic. And those are the 7 archetypes. None of those are wrong. None of those are bad. They're neither good nor bad. They just are. And really what it comes down to is how you're going to embrace each of these archetypes in yourself in order to produce favorable results for you and the people that you have a responsibility for. How are you going to use your archetype to protect, provide, and preside for other people? Let's just do a quick recap, and then we'll call it a day. Number 1, you have the king. I said Elon Musk and Trump. A warrior, Jocko Willink, Cam Hanes. A jester, Theo Vaughn, Ryan Reynolds, Dave Chappelle. A scholar, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Huberman. A priest, Granger Smith, Mark Driscoll. A statesman, Ron DeSantis, Barack Obama. And then the romantic, Matthew McConaughey, Ryan Gosling. My intention today, guys, was to give you these archetypes, not to pigeonhole you into being one or the other or all this or all that or a combination of. It's just so you can start seeing how you view yourself and how other people view you. Now, if I can, I'll tell you, my archetypes are going to be more in the king and warrior category. I'm definitely not a jester. I take life very seriously. I'm certainly not a scholar. I can be fairly well-versed and can communicate well, but I'm not real well-researched. Priest, not me. Statesman, again, not me. Romantic, not me. So I fall into the king and the warrior archetypes, if you're wondering and you're curious. Now, I would challenge you to ask yourself, where do you fall? And where do you want to fall? By the way, guys, and we have some crossover. We have the jester Ryan Reynolds here, but Ryan Reynolds can also be a romantic. Trump, as the king, can also be a jester. Andrew Huberman, as the intellect, can also be a warrior. So again, we're not pigeonholing ourselves. We're just looking at what our strengths and weaknesses are, what categories we fall into, how we can improve in one area, and how we can shore up the areas we're not so great at so that we can be the well-rounded men that people need us to be. I hope that helps. And I'm sure that I missed some archetypes, and I'm sure you guys have some additional ideas. A lot of this you might agree with, and there might be people that you disagree with on this list. We're not debating politics or any of that. We're debating the virtues and characteristics of these individuals, and do they fall into these categories? I hope that helps, guys. We'll be back next week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.